All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to House Arrest with Chris and Tamara. We hope you guys had a great week. Chris Barber is coming at us live from Big Red tonight. He is on the road. Chris, tell us about your week.
Well, it's been a week. Left on Tuesday morning, went to Grand Island, Nebraska, loaded a brand new case combine, and got caught in a fog storm this morning. So obviously had to park that one out of being oversized. I am in South Dakota right now and headed for home. So it's good to be here. Hopefully my internet holds and hopefully everything works right. I've never done this on the iPad on my dash, so this is usually my e-log.
Nice. What was it like crossing the border?
Absolutely simple. I pulled up to the window. The guy said, "You don't have any weapons or drugs are in there?" And I said, "No, sir. Have a good trip." And gave me my coupon for the gate, and off we went. So I can tell you I have slept like a baby the last number of nights, not having any of that anxiety about, police knocking at your door at 3 o'clock in the morning. How was your week, Tamara? Would you like to let everybody know?
Oh, yes. Well, I had quite an interesting week. It was really like up and down, and it was very busy, especially with my house arrest. So obviously, just organizing my community service. I'm trying to get as many hours in per week as I can. So that's, constant scheduling and organizing there. And then, of course, we're working with the probation team, basically, my probation officer and those that are above her. As you know, I'm trying to get out to Manitoba to be with my daughter while she has her baby and help out for a little while afterwards. So I did get word yesterday morning that that was approved. So I'm very excited about that. We have a few details that we have to iron out, but there's a lovely little cabin we have out there that I'll be under house arrest in, and it's absolutely gorgeous there. So I'm looking forward to getting out there and seeing my daughter and my granddaughters. And then, of course, I had a visit at 12:26 a.m. in the morning on early hours of Wednesday morning, my very first police visit, if you will. So that was interesting. I mean, I knew that they were coming, obviously. I just never thought that they would show up that late. But I mean, they can basically show up whenever they want. So I just hope that I did email my probation officer yesterday and just asked if it would be inappropriate, perhaps, for me to contact Medicine Hat Police Service and just, let them know that I'm not going to be here, because I definitely don't want them, coming here when I'm gone and waking up my daughter and my grandchildren. So, I mean, this is the realities of house arrest. Everything has a few more steps. Everything takes a little bit longer. It requires considerable detailed planning, and you have to be at home when they show up, and because if not, you're going to jail. So, yeah, it's been an interesting week.
And I haven't felt that anxiety since I crossed the border, to be honest with you. And it's been completely different. And, of course, when I'm out here, I have to eat and I have to sit down and have a restaurant meal. And last night I went in for my shower in the truck stop and fueled up and got the truck washed. And I've been at peace and I've been relaxing the week here. I'm working, and that's why I'm allowed to be down here, of course. But it's a different atmosphere, totally.
I'm so happy for you. Well, I mean, we've got friends down there, and actually one of our guests today, Gord Magill, lives in the United States. He's a Canadian trucker, former Canadian trucker that now lives in the United States. So he can tell us, probably clarify this for us. But I mean, a lot of our friends have gone down to the United States, and they'll say it's just a completely different mindset. It just feels so much more free than being in Canada, and it would be a bit of an eye opener, I think. When you're in it, you don't notice it quite so much as when you get out of it and you're on the outside looking in, right?
It's a little reminiscent of COVID times, when I used to truck across the border all the time during COVID times. I would come into North Dakota, and of course in Canada we were like so locked down, COVID vaccine passports in restaurants, and everything was scrutinized, mask mandates, you name it. I would cross into North Dakota, and it would be day and night difference. And I think that was one of the things that bugged me the most, and why I got involved with Convoy in the first place. Was I seen that difference. I lived down here when I trucked. I seen the amount of tyranny that wasn't going on down here. And then you cross the border and you had to get your ArriveCan app or your Arrive Scam app, whatever the liberals want to call it nowadays. And it brings me back to that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. There's lots of coincidences between our current situation and what happened a few years ago, that's for sure, including being locked up in our home, I guess.
exactly. Yes.
But there's worse places to be. I see, obviously there was that one lady that was tweeting about how Tamara just seems to have way too much freedom last week, which I got a bit of a kick out of. Like it's really driving a lot of our detractors crazy that you and I aren't miserable. And that's why I made that post about self-flagellation, right? I mean, obviously people just really wish that we would be suffering and crying and begging
Oh,
for mercy, and we're just making the most out of our situation.
I've seen a
I
couple.
am extremely sarcastic, and I did see some people this morning on X accusing me of being disrespectful to the police, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all. I have a very sarcastic sense of humor. I think it's absolutely ludicrous that they have to come, like, it's 10, it's after I'm in bed by 9:30 basically, right? I mean, like I said earlier, if I'm gonna bust out of here, like lose my mind and freak out and bust out of my house, it's gonna be for a hazelnut frappuccino during regular business hours.
All right.
So so
That-
anyways,
It
yeah.
just shows, like, a lot of these, and it's the unfortunate part, but they're just doing their job. We understand that.
They are. Yep,
But like,
yep.
at what part of that job where you think, oh my gosh, I'm waking somebody's grandchildren up at 1:30 in the morning or 12:30 in the morning, because that's what they did, right? And I think that there's a part of that
For
job.
mischief.
I still go back to like 1930s Germany, and some of those people were just doing their job too. And I know it's a different analogy, and don't start on me with that, anybody in the comments, but it's the same theory, and it's the mindset leading up to tyranny and government control, and that complete control.
Hmm. Yeah, very much so. I kind of liken this to like a humiliation ritual. That's kind of what it feels like. They just want us to, well, like I said, be miserable and unhappy and suffer, and walking into the probation office or going to do community service. But I mean, I'm so lucky. I absolutely love the community service that I'm doing. Have you started yours yet? I know that you're going to do some with your municipality at the with the fire hall, correct?
Yes, yeah, they were touching base, back and forth on messages the last couple weeks here, and finally, I think they connected. So communication started, and I think, judging by the email there, the message that I got from our administrator was that the probation officer asked if they could send more people out to do community service, and they're like, "Hell no, we're good. We got enough for Chris here." So I'll probably start that in the next
Uh,
little while. Obviously, trucking's busy right now.
Yeah, good. And how is that working for you as far as scheduling? I mean, I know that's kind of a roadblock for you and your probation officer because in your line of work, I mean, your schedule can change at any time. So, I mean, obviously, you're probably losing some work because you can't just jump in your truck at the last minute and go. I know she had said something to you about your trip down to Nebraska, why it was going to take you one day to get there and 2 days to get back. And I'm like, a combine? Like, there's a
Yeah,
lot of things that they don't understand. So tell me how that's been going for you this week.
it's been really, really, really frustrating just to try and line the schedule up with how my week works. I've got 4 other trucks on the road. If those trucks don't hit the schedule that they're supposed to be on for the week, and it commonly happens, and somebody has to step up and hit that load. So I'm that guy that does all the administrative work, the paperwork, the dispatch, and then I have to try and make up for that. So I kind of pick and choose what loads I do, and it's been a
Mhm.
struggle the last little while. I know it's made her fairly frustrated with my lack of knowing where I'm going to be 5 days in advance. And so this week it was amazing. I just emailed on Monday and I said, listen, I've got parts that I have to get in Swift Current on Monday. I'm going to leave on Tuesday. I'm going to go to Nebraska, load a combine, possibly load Wednesday. I'll be back Saturday at the latest. And I'm trying to give myself that extra time in case I have problems. And right away, the
Right.
email came back in saying, only a day and a half to get there, but 2.5 days to get home. And am I missing something? And I just, yeah, you're missing a lot.
Mhm.
I didn't make my load appointment yesterday, so I loaded this morning. And as I got loaded, this fog bank rolled in on Nebraska, and it just was quarter-mile visibility. And most people know I'm just under 12 feet wide coming home. I'm not allowed to drive in adverse weather conditions, and fog is a limiting factor to that. So right
Right.
away, I had to unhook the trailer. I bobtailed down to the truck stop, and I spent till 1:30 there, sitting out waiting for the fog. So where I should have been home Friday afternoon, I will be home now Saturday. So I'm glad I booked that. And that's just another
Right.
contributing factor to just how many things change in a week for me. But we're working through it. We're trying to find that common ground.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I did tweet about this today too. You know, the relationship between the accused, that's really what we are, like on any documents I sign as I'm the accused, and their probation officer really is one of earning trust, I think, on both sides. You know, obviously with some of our dealings, you know, we're going to be less trusting walking into that office, and I mean they don't know us either. So I think, I mean, I look at my exemption to go to Manitoba as a win,
Mhm.
and you know, an opportunity really to, obviously I've earned enough of their trust that they're willing to let me go out of jurisdiction. I was going to be able to go anyways to Manitoba at some point because the judge, you know, had put that in the conditions at our sentencing. However, it was just the ins and outs of it, right? So I mean, that's just one of the things that we have to do. I mean, we're in the system now. We are in the
Yep.
system now, and there, in my view, there is only one successful path out of the system, and that is by abiding by our conditions and following the law. So, yeah, here we are.
That is our circumstances. And by all means, I said that I've drafted a video about your house, you know, visit at 12:30, and I haven't posted it yet because I'm just still sitting on it. But you know, we're not against law enforcement. We're not out here breaking rules, and you know, just like having a conversation with my person in the office there. When I was asked my feelings towards the Canadian justice system, and I bluntly said, I think it's been hijacked by politicians and it's been weaponized by politicians, and we are a product of that. It's evident that this has been a political persecution right from the start. So we're not criminals per se. I still don't see myself as a criminal, even though the government does. Um, we're not out here to break the
Well,
rules. They're not catch us on a breach. So
exactly. Exactly. Well, I forgot to mention last week when I had my meeting with my officer last week, she'd at our initial I'm sure I told you guys about the interview that we did. So we did an interview over the course of two appointments where, you know, she asked me a bunch of questions and assesses um, if I'm going to reoffend or this or that. And really, it's about getting to know me. So I actually took her one of my books last week, and I said,
oh really?
I don't think you can accept this as a gift. I don't think they are allowed to do that, but I would gladly lend you my book. You said you wanted to learn about me and learn about my motivations and my upbringing and you know, a lot of things. So read my book. So, and she took it. So hopefully she does read it. We'll see.
I hope it might be informative.
So it might be. All right. Okay. Well, I guess that's pretty much it for the update on our house arrest for now. We've got Gord and Tom and Ray standing back in the backstage. So, Ruby, I will get you to run our clip, and then we will bring tonight's guests on. We've got author Ray McGinnis and Gord Magill, also an author with a book coming out next week. So go ahead, Ruby, and roll that clip.
Robert and Anthony Olenek pled not guilty to all the charges against them.
They were there exercising their rights to object to government policies, and due to very powerful forces, they've been caught up and railroaded, really, by the government, and sort of used as
There's a publication ban, which is quite specific to some, you know, an unsealed envelope and some redacted documents that nobody can see.
We think we arrested one of us. We're not sure 100% yet, but I think so because I don't see him around here.
They are charged with conspiracy to murder. The Crown is alleging that they conspired to murder police officers. They're both also being charged with unlawful possession of firearms for a purpose dangerous to the public peace. They're also both being charged with mischief-inducing damage over $5,000 for willfully obstructing lawful use of Highway 4 without color of right. Anthony Olenek has one unique charge against him that Chris Carber does not have. He's being accused of unlawful possession of an explosive device, an incendiary device.
We will be here for the boys in Ottawa until all of Canada is free.
Wow. Welcome, Ray and Gord, to the show. And also, as always, Mr. Tom Arazo, thank you guys for coming. How are you doing tonight?
Good.
Yeah, great to be on the panel with these great guests. Obviously,
Yes.
you and Chris and Tamara. So this is good and nice to see both Gord and Ray again.
Hmm.
And
We
I
saw you
just
guys last at the sentencing.
I wanna plug Ray's book because that's what I do.
Oh yes,
Okay,
I
that's
got it right
Ray's
here.
book. Yeah, and you know what, Ray?
Unjustified.
I've got a copy too.
Awesome. Gord, your turn. You're next. Same with you, Chris. Start writing. You got
I have just completed writing a book, and it'll be out in March.
Nice.
I'd be happy to help. I'd be happy to help Big Red write his.
Yeah.
Well, there's a gear shift between you and I, Gordon, writing a book, but hey, it's sitting right here.
Oh my gosh.
You'll
Well,
have to
welcome,
hire
you
me.
guys. It's so great to see you again. I was just saying, I think the last time we saw you was both at our sentencing. Gord and Ray both have shown up to numerous hearings with us. So, we've really appreciated that. One of the things that you guys are both really well known for, and that I absolutely applaud, is your coverage of everything that happened down at Coutt's. I know you both have been instrumental in writing about the things that the mainstream media isn't reporting on. Gord, I know you just spoke with Tony. You talk to these guys fairly regularly. So I think we are, and for sure our viewers are definitely looking forward to an update on how the men are doing, where they're at within their legal cases, and how we can help them with their legal fees.
Yeah, well, and it's great to be talking about it. And of course, there's been quite a lot of people who've been covering this. I mean, I've met Chris Carbert, and I've met Chris Lysick, and I've spoken to, I think, both of the other guys earlier on. And I was able to go to a couple of 3 days I was in Lethbridge, sort of at the point where the Crown had finished and the defense began to make their arguments for acquittal in Lethbridge in the middle of the Coutt's 2 trial. But one thing I want to not forget, and you can weave me in when you want, is I write about, and I've made some notes for this evening to talk about how this came up at the Public Order Emergency Commission, and which people were talking about what was happening in Coutt's as an example to say, see, this is why we had to invoke the Emergencies Act. It's useful to know how Coutt's was used as yet another reason for why the government was justified in the view of senior bureaucrats and certain politicians.
Yeah, I have an anecdote to share that ties into something Ray just said, because there was a very curious decision made on the part of RCMP at Coutt's about 4 days before the arrests started happening on the night of February 13th. And that has to do with the necessity, or what we believe is the necessity on the part of the government to keep the protest going. And it actually says that in court documents. And it's highlighted by Brendan Miller's appeal, which is before the courts right now. We should be getting the guesstimate is that we will get a ruling on that in February. But Miller is essentially asking to have all of the convictions for Tony's, on the minor charges thrown out based on charter breaches and the actions of the RCMP. And when we get to that, it'll kind of remind you a little bit of other instances where the RCMP are basically keystone cops and doing things really ass backwards and putting the public in danger if the story in Coutt's is actually to be believed.
Bless you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm very sick. I have a pretty serious lung infection, and I've been coughing like a maniac here for a few weeks, and it just won't let me go.
It's okay. No problem. No problem at all.
Yeah.
Ray, how did you get started? I mean, how did you get started and involved in reporting on these cases? Because I've talked to you numerous times, and you sort of started your journey kind of on the other side of the fence. So what got you to the point where you're at today? What led you to start reporting on this case specifically?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, not everybody who's the son of a dentist normally ends up in the position I'm in. So and yeah, my background, upper, like the west side of Vancouver, all of the most of the close friends of my parents were almost invariably back in the 60s and 70s, because I'm a kind of child of the 60s and 70s, and almost everybody who came to the home for a party or dinner was almost always at that time Dr. and Mrs. So-and-so. They were either doctors, physicians, dentists, chiropractors, all of that. And they all went to a number of different private golf clubs. So my view always of physicians and all of that was a certain thing. And then also I had no, aside from one other dentist's son who was chose to surprisingly not go to university like the rest of us and become a truck driver. And Alan was doing this and making good money, but we all just thought, well, isn't that a curious thing to do? So this is kind of the background I had. So when the protests were happening in 2022, I already had a friend who had eagerly gone to get vaccinated, because he was now, they could do it in June of 2021, and he got the AstraZeneca, and he got within 12 hours a catastrophic stroke. He couldn't talk, he couldn't walk, and he still can't work. And all of that is going on for him. So, and then there were a couple of other people that I knew who had, atrial fibrillation, or they couldn't, or they were out of breath within a block and had to take a taxi everywhere because they couldn't walk. So, or they couldn't move very well. So I knew that the whole thing about the vaccine, certainly if it was safe, it wasn't safe for everybody. And so by the time the protests were happening, and I haven't had a TV since the Persian Gulf War, so I don't get I don't get the kind of visuals that other people get. So I was listening to people who were going for walks with me, exploding and how angry they were with the protesters in Ottawa and so on. And then, the gun photo with the RCMP and Couts. And it was after the Prime Minister invoked the Emergencies Act that I just thought there was something really fundamentally wrong with this. And so I wrote an article that ended up being on, and I have no connection to media, so I ended up on something called Dissident Voice, which is actually kind of a left-wing platform in the States critiquing the Emergencies Act. And then from there, I kind of went on catching up to a lot of things that have been happening online, and then chose to go to, after there was enough that stunk to me, I decided finally to fly out to the Public Order Association and be there for a week in the middle of November of 2022. And I had at that point been just keeping notes. I had written a number of articles that were mostly actually out of European websites or in getting interviewed by people in Portugal and France and Germany. But in any event, I got encouraged to write a book about this. And so after I'd written a long article that was critiquing the POEC report in late February of 2023, which was on the Covert Action magazine out in Washington, D.C., I got a lot of people saying, don't stop writing, write a book. So as a result of that, then I started meeting people like Trish Wood, and she encouraged me not just to be writing about the convoy in Ottawa, but also do some more write about what's happening in Coutt. So then I ended up doing that and ended up getting on a variety of different podcasts talking about that, but also writing and researching what I could from my perch in Vancouver. So it's been a really interesting ride, because I call myself the unexpected author of this kind of material.
Right. Yes. Right. Wow. Well done. And Gord, how did you get involved in covering the Coutt story?
Oh, wow. Good. Pardon me. The lady who's most responsible for that, I see, is in the comments and is watching, and that is my Auntie Kate.
Oh,
And
wow.
my Auntie Kate hooked me up with Margaret McKay because I had started my Substack a couple of years ago just to sort of write about trucking, host my podcast mostly about trucking. I had written a few articles in defense of the convoy for Newsweek magazine here in the United States. And my Auntie Kate had told me, she's like, you know, did you know these guys in Alberta are still in prison and like they haven't been given bail? And I'm like, what? I haven't heard anything about that. And so I started chasing it down. I interviewed Margaret for my show. Then I ended up speaking with Nikki Tom, who's one of Tony Oleynik's best friends and has been one of their most solid supporters and doing an awful lot of the legwork for the guys, kind of taking on a second job as a paralegal for the legal team for everybody, you know, amongst other, you know, women in that group behind them. And it just kind of went from there. My editor at Newsweek, former editor, Bot Younger Sargon, she's no longer with them. She heard my interview with Margaret and said, hey, this story is nuts. Do you want to write about it for Newsweek? So I ended up doing 2 articles about it there. And those 2 articles landed on the desk of Mr. Tucker Carlson. And I was alerted to that. And when I found out that he was going to talk in Alberta last, I guess, January 2024 now.
Right.
Yes, it's time flies, eh? I had been put in touch with his producers and I said, you know, he probably shouldn't talk about this before he gets there because, you know, it's a pretty touchy situation in Alberta. And, you know, if he comes in there guns blazing about it beforehand, they might not let him on stage. I was just sort of trying to say, you know, be easy before you get there. And after a bunch of back and forth emails, they said, you know what, you should just come on the show and talk about this. This is nuts. And so that's how that happened. And I, you know, because I'd sort of developed some trust with the boys and, you know, they called me from prison and I wrote these articles. I started writing more and more about it on my Substack. Because, you know, as you know, the media in Canada are completely and utterly uninterested in discussing anything about this outside of the government narrative. I have filed complaints with the CBC Ombudsman, which they have responded to. I have heard back from the Ombudsman. I've heard back from one of the managers at CBC Calgary because I've said to them, like, look, like you guys screwed this up badly. Your coverage is atrocious. You haven't spoke with the defense side of this case at all. You guys are omitting things and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. And that's like, this is just not good journalism. And of course they deflect and they say, oh no, we're doing everything by our rules. And okay, I guess you are. And I just continued writing about it on Substack. And, you know, it's sort of been this thing that's kind of carried on. I still speak with Tony. I speak with Chris Carbert. Mr. Carbert was released bail on appeal here a few months ago. So he's at home in Lethbridge. He's working and getting on with his life.
Good.
As I understand it, same with Jerry Morin and Chris Lysak. You know, I spoke with Jacqueline Martin here recently, and they're just keeping their heads down. Jerry's building up his business and they're, you know, just flying below the radar and trying to stay out of the limelight.
Get on with their life. Yeah. I just text chatted with Chris and Chris, the 2 Chris's. I have so many Chris's in my life. I can't believe it. But I talked with them about, you know, the show, if there was anything specific they wanted us to bring up or if they want to come on. But, you know, in the end, especially with their cases ongoing, we just felt it was best to just come on and promote awareness and not put them in a situation. I think those men have all been put through enough, personally speaking. So, Gord, you said that you have talked with Tony recently. Can you give us an update on how he's doing? What does he need?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I think in the couple of years I've been talking with Tony from prison now, I think there was only ever one time where he sounded down, right? I would compare Tony to the Paul Newman character in Cool Hand Luke. You guys have seen that movie? It's a sort of classic movie about this guy. He gets busted. He's drunk and he like smashes a parking meter goes to jail and the guards are picking on him, the prison warden's picking on him, but he always just has a smile on his face, and he escapes, he goes back, but he doesn't let them ever get him down. And Tony is very much in this same, positive, not letting this situation get him down. He's been a model prisoner. All the reviews of his incarceration, like why are you even here? When he got to Drumheller, he was given a job unloading freight for the prison, which is pretty highly sensitive, because if you want to put contraband or illegal substances, that's where it comes through. But every time they talk to Tony and assess him, they're like, this guy he's a workaholic, and he's got no issues, no problems. And, he's always got jobs at prison. He administers his faith to other people. He tries to help guys out who've had, a rough time, did stupid crap, which led them to being in prison. And so Tony's just been of a very positive vibe, very useful to his fellow prisoners. He's just an awesome dude. He was a workaholic. How he got involved in, he wanted to stand up for his fellow citizens. That's why he went to Coutt's. Again, this entire trial is it's a bit of a sham, and we can get into the details why all this is happening. But Tony's good, and I told him I was coming on here to talk with you guys, and he did want to say that he's very thankful for all the support. He's thankful for the letters. He really misses everybody outside. He pays a lot of attention to the news because, they do get TV in there, and him and the other inmates talk about politics and current events all the time. So he's keeping his mind active. He knows a lot about what's going on outside. And he's likewise concerned with a number of issues out there in Canada. Alberta separatism, this 51st state nonsense with the US. He pays attention to all that. And he sort of understands why these questions are taking place, and he's very much looking forward. He did want to say when he does get out, he kind of wants to go on tour, perhaps with you guys, meet all his supporters all across the country, and try and sort of spread a message of unity. He did say that he thought it would be really good when they have to let him out. So if he doesn't get bail on appeal, and the reason he hasn't got bail on appeal like Carbert is because it's another 15 to 25 grand to file it, which he does not have. There's currently other legal stuff going on with one of his former lawyers who's being sued for allegedly ripping Tony off to the tune of $600K. So there's lots going on there, but no matter what happens, they have to let him out in June of 2026. And he did say that he thought it would be awesome if he could be picked up by Big Red.
Well, I think if I make a buck going there, I can definitely, as long as I'm working, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I can add that I've talked recently to Chris Carbert, and he's got a job. And he's got a girlfriend. Don't think he needs that to be a secret. And he also is really grateful for tons of support that he's got in the Lethbridge area and of course beyond. And so he's I think that kind of support is a real rock for him, and he's grateful. And as Gord mentioned, they had their appeal was heard on September 11th. And they're just waiting to see what happens when the decision is made regarding what the justice system or the judge makes of the appeal in the time ahead.
Mm-hmm. I just had Chris Carbert's email address up there. I just didn't specify in the banner here that this is actually for his e-transfers. If you want to, he did have a Give Send Go. But I guess he did close it. So if you want to help Chris Carbert with his legal fees, he has auto deposit set up, and you can email chriscarbert77@gmail.com to help him with that. And any updates on Chris Lysak? I've talked to him just via text a little bit the last week too, but have you guys talked to him, and how's he doing?
My sense I did get to meet him when there was a kind of like a barbecue that happened the week that I was out in July of 2024. And my sense, I mean, I had dinner with him and a few other people the night before, a couple days before the barbecue. And my sense is, I mean, I got to meet two of his daughters, and I have a sense that he just wants to be out of the spotlight. And so he's
move on with his life.
He's carrying on. He's got a huge amount of money that he still needs to raise to pay for his legal fees, and so he's just wanting to keep away from the media and the bright lights and carry on, much like Jerry and Jacqueline are telling Gord.
Yes. Well, I certainly don't blame those gentlemen. Like I said, they've been through so much already as it is. So,
I've spoke with Tony a few times in the last couple of years, and Gord, I'll echo your sentiment there. He is always positive. He's always, he's never negative. The guy has been through literal hell. All four of them have been through hell. When you listen to some of the stories that they can tell, about shipping you off into the drug unit in the remand center in Calgary, where, some of the stories we've heard have been absolutely gut-wrenching of what they've been through. But Tony's always kept his spirits up, and like you said, holding church service and doing prayer meetings. That's what Tony does, and Chris.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that Gord mentioned earlier around the CBC's coverage in late November of 2022, the CBC ran a story about how the Coutts four were, all of them were still behind bars, of course, were making phone calls to their quote unnamed bosses. But we've never, if there are some people who were like the big boss somewhere in the background pulling the strings, that just sort of seemed to fade away as something that was never, the Crown never said, oh, and by the way, there are these big shadowy figures in the background. Now we're going to name these names to see who these four men were being handled by and put forward. That's just a story that was out there in the media that just evaporated when it came to the trial.
Yeah, a lot of things evaporated at trial. This connection to Diagolon and Mr. McKenzie and all that crew, total non-issue at court, never mentioned. It was just nothing. And the government tried to make it out like these guys were part of some international conspiracy and they were going to take over the entire government from Coutts. And they literally went into overdrive with the fear. Everyone remembers the photo of all those assembled weapons. A number of them didn't even belong to those guys. And if we're going to have a conspiracy to murder police officers, how come all the other people who were implicated in the ownership of those firearms, which were drawn from multiple different locations, why were they not all charged with the same thing? Why only these four? One of the, if I might get into the appeal from Brendan Miller here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's the facts that Miller's referencing in this appeal here talk about how, in order to get one of these wiretaps, and what's the under the wiretaps, there's like a section of the criminal code 184.4 to get a warrantless wiretap. There have to be a bunch of different conditions that are met. If you are able to arrest them before applying for the wiretap, you are supposed to arrest them, right? And one of the things that Miller is saying in the appeal is that why were they not arrested? Because according to the undercovers, there was going to be this shipment of guns that later proven in court, no guns. It was a guitar and some kind of an angle grinder and then a bunch of bags of clothes. There was never any guns being shipped. Of course, not mentioned afterwards in the wash in the media about all this, but the allegations that the UCOs had made about this were relayed north through their chain of command on February 9th, and they weren't arrested until the 13th. So we have all these cops there. They have identified Jerry Moran's pickup truck. They have identified Chris and Tony, or they have alleged that Chris and Tony are going to receive this shipment of guns. Why were they not immediately arrested? Well, they weren't. And they were told because they didn't want to, they didn't want the protest to peter out. They didn't want to give protesters a reason to leave. What? The whole point of this was to crush the Freedom Convoy. What they didn't want to do was to get rid of Trudeau's necessary, rationale for invoking the Emergencies Act. They literally could have arrested everybody involved at Coutt's 4 days before, and they did not. So, in effect, their application for wiretaps, and it should be known here too, if anybody following the court case closely, like Ray or myself, knows, obviously people who are dependent on the media, maybe not, but nothing ever came up from those wiretaps. There was never any actionable evidence on them. So in order to avoid losing their wiretaps, they did not execute an arrest based on, alleged shipment. And so, like, the Portapique massacre in Nova Scotia, right? Like, the cops know that this guy is like running loose. There's a whole bunch of communication failures or intentional lack of communication. So these two undercover officers, these hot young things who are casing Coutts, make up this story about Tony Oleanick and Chris Carbert receiving weapons in a bag from Jerry Moran, which was totally false, right? They were implying that, trying to like ascertain code from their communication. Their higher officers on site believed it, but instead of acting on that, they said, no, we're not going to arrest these guys because we want to get a wiretap instead. And we don't want the protesters to disperse, because if we arrest them now, maybe some of them will leave. Like when you look at some of the documents related to what happened with the cops there, it's just unbelievable stuff.
Yeah, and
that's very reminiscent of even pre-convoy, like before we left in the convoy with them, the PMO and the Public Safety Office working in conjunction with, I think it was Global News, or it was one of the mainstream medias, saying the same thing. Don't come down too hard on them because we don't want to push the crazies out, because they really wanted that element, I think, at both locations, well, all of them, to seep through. That's the stuff they wanted to report on. So, sorry, Ray, go ahead.
What was going on? So you've got this is, what's coming out in the pre-trial and disclosure and in the trial here, and at the Public Order Emergency Commission, you have person after person pointing to the situation in Coutts. I mean, they also pointing to things like the Memorandum of Understanding, remember, which is supposed to overthrow the government, right? With James Bowder and a whole bunch of other things, and all the weapons that maybe are in the trucks and in Ottawa. But Janice Charette, who's the clerk of the Privy Council, in her testimony regarding why she recommended invoking the Emergencies Act, amongst other things going on in Ottawa, she also says, well, there was this, quote, stash of firearms and ammunition at Coutts, and the nature of the threat to the nation and the risk of serious violence. And she cites the quantity of weapons, the ammo discovered by the RCMP, and she also said that she was concerned about the insurrectionist tendencies of those who were trying to overthrow the government and install a new government and a new governor general. And then you have Natalie Drouin, the deputy clerk of the Privy Council, dismissing suggestions that, well, you've got the arrests of the Couts 4 and the other, all 13 altogether. All of this happened without the invocation of the Emergencies Act. I mean, everybody was arrested in Coutts before the EA was invoked. And she is dismissing that and saying that what was going on was, that they couldn't have dealt with it without invoking the Emergencies Act. So, we know that's not true, but she was insisting that that was the case. And then Marco Mendocino, the public safety minister, is saying that the situation in Coutts was, quote, combustible, and that individuals in Coutts were prepared to go down for a fight, and that this could lead to a loss of life, and that what was happening in Coutts was, quote, a threshold moment. And Jody Thomas, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, said that the Coutt's blockade was, quote, part of a spectrum of activity and behavior and threat that was intolerable.
Yes, they are saying all of this at the same time as RCMP, the sort of leadership group at Coutt's are telling their officers, no, don't arrest these guys. So there's a dangerous threat that's going to overthrow the government. We know they have all these guns, but don't arrest them. Not yet. We have to wait a couple days.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I was reading through some of the articles that you sent, Ray, and I mean, one of the things in regards to the weapons that they found was, I mean, they were accusing Tony of having, they called them pipe bombs. The RCMP called them pipe bombs because that sounds a lot more scary. However, people that know the story, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony's father used to have a sandblasting business. That's what it was. Some kind of landscaping.
Tony and his late father operated a gravel quarry together, okay?
Right.
And they processed aggregates, sandstone, and they used to use these things called firecrackers, which are a really small explosive device to dislodge bits that got stuck as they're like drilling holes to break up rock, right? It's all part of gravel quarrying. And the thing, again, and getting back to this appeal from Miller, all these two ancient firecrackers that were in a box, in storage, buried at Tony's property, like his father had since passed on. And Tony just had all of his dad's stuff just like parked in storage. The RCMP go out there and execute a warrant and search Tony's property. I think it was 5 days after he was already arrested. And his property is over 200 kilometers away from Coutt's. They find these industrial explosives. The media gets a hold of it and starts calling them pipe bombs. How is it? I don't know how people didn't see through this for the ruse that it was. They're just trying to pad their case. How is it that you're going to have bombs to throw at the cops when they're 200 kilometers away, buried in a storage unit? And according to the explosives expert that they did come bring in to testify at court, they were basically unusable, right? Like they were just rusted out. Right. They probably wouldn't have done anything. So this whole pipe bomb stuff was just a load of malarkey to try and, build fear and pad their case. And it was totally nonsense. Part of Miller's appeal is also that the warrant to search Tony's property was also using, because I can't remember exactly the technicality of it, but it is also a charter breach, and therefore the finding of these industrial explosives should just be thrown out. And Justice Lebrenz erred in allowing any of this to come to court at all, over and above the fact it's ridiculous. But apparently the warrant was not executed properly, or it was got to by dishonest means.
Well, wasn't the warrant also like when they got like their information to obtain whatever the Checkley and so on, they kind of had a very wide net. Like, we're going to just sort of go in there and see what we can get, like data or whatever, and then here's some guns or whatever else. Like they cast it to the judge in a way that was more vague.
Yes, and there was a lot of disingenuous communication between the RCMP and between the justice who issued the warrants. Somebody in the chat earlier brought up the envelope thing. Anecdote from Tony when I was talking to him on the phone about the appeal. So September 11, 2025, just a couple months ago, Tony and Chris both have to go to court in Calgary. Brendan Miller's there, Catherine Bayak, Chris Carbert's lawyer. They have like a whole day of these hearings to like file the appeal against a 3-judge panel, right? So Justice Lebrenz is not there. Crown Prosecutor Johnston from the case is not there. This is 3 judges that are going to review all of the appeals that Bayak and Miller had brought to them. And at one point during the hearing, Chris Carbert and Tony Boyanek had to leave because they were discussing the envelope thing. And so I just want to make sure that like everybody listening to this, there's been a couple of years of this now, but the allegation is this. During pretrial motions, one of Tony's previous legal counsel became aware of a piece of evidence that showed, or is alleged to have showed, that Crown Prosecutor Stephen Johnston told RCMP that we're about to execute the warrants on Chris Carbert's travel trailer, which is parked, away from the protest site on another part of town of Coutt. And because the warrants only stipulated looking for data and data devices, because it was very, very specific, they were looking for information about Tony's role in being the sort of like volunteer security at Couts or any other related information. Very specific. That's all you're allowed to look for, right? And again, the undercover officers had made all these allegations about all these things Tony allegedly said. No recordings, audio or video of any of it. It's just the UCOs saying that this is what Tony said. No evidence of it anywhere. The undercover officers rode around in Tony's pickup truck while he was doing a security detail at Couts. And while they were in his pickup truck, they never saw any guns. They never saw any devices, no laptop computers, no notebooks, no nothing. All he had was a CB radio and his clothes and his phone, and that's it. So they get these warrants, and the allegation is that has been sealed in this envelope is that Johnston, who's also, advising the RCMP at Couts, said, grab whatever you can, boys, and I'll deal with it later, which is illegal. Now, that got sealed in this pre-trial where Tony Rolston was there, Catherine Bayak, again, a couple of the other lawyers who have since changed out, right? So the Couts guys went through something like 13 or 14 lawyers throughout this entire drama. And those four lawyers, Crown Prosecutor Johnston, maybe one of the other Crown prosecutors, Delitowitz, or maybe the other guy, and David Lebrenz, the only people in this meeting. Johnston asks for it to be sealed. Rolston says there's a crime fraud exemption to this because, you can't claim solicitor client privilege because, there's an allegation that the government did something wrong. The government being represented by Stephen Johnston. Lebrenz seals it anyway, and it's still sealed. And when Tony and Chris and a number of other people who were at the appeal hearing in September had to leave the courtroom when this was discussed because it's still considered sealed evidence. If that evidence ever sees the light of day, this whole thing gets thrown out, and Stephen Johnston should be the guy going to court.
Right. Do you think that'll ever happen?
Don't know.
Yeah.
I spent a day in that courtroom watching those boys go through what they did, and it was. Has anybody ever seen Hannibal Lecter's cage in some of the movies? That's what Chris and Tony look like in that courtroom. Two people locked in a glass cabin inside that courtroom. It was absolutely disgusting.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember that. It certainly tried to make it like they were these violent criminals when Tony Oleanick, no criminal record, workaholic his whole life, youngest person to ever get a trade certification for plumber in the entire province of Alberta because he dropped out of high school. And he got his Red Seal plumbing ticket when he was 18 or 19 or something. Then he goes to work with his dad. Then he starts running heavy equipment. The guy was just a workaholic. That's all he ever wanted to do was just keep on working. And no criminality whatsoever his entire life. Chris Carbert got busted with a couple of hits of ecstasy when he was a kid. No violence, no nothing, never had any trouble. And the government puts them in these cages as if they're violent criminals about to jump on the crowd in court or something. It was pretty disgusting, as Chris said.
Well, it's all about the optics. Like you said, it's all about creating, this illusion of fear and, we're just all a bunch of crazy, violent criminals. So we all know that it's absolute nonsense.
Control the messaging and you control the narrative. And that is literally the government's playbook for the last how many years?
It's a reflection of how, not that this is like the Wizard of Oz, but I imagine a musical about the convoy where they say truckers and linemen and plumbers, oh my, or something like that. And so it's this making ordinary people that have solid trades jobs seem to be scary. It's just really disheartening with what has been happening. And when Brenda Lucky, the RCMP commissioner, was on the stand at the public inquiry, as Gord has talked about this, everyone, she's describing the Couts 4, especially as a quote hardened cell. And just like, and it, even if they thought that, the RCMP officers who obtain the explosive device in its rusted out state in Tony's home 200 kilometers away should have been able to ascertain that it was not even usable if someone had wanted to use it. And yet they ignore that and carry on ginning up the fear about the whole story.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of ginning up and a whole lot of misinformation. They claimed Couts was like some drag on the economy and that trucks couldn't get through. One of the things a lot of people don't know is that the Couts border crossing in that whole 2.5 or 3 weeks of the protest being there was only ever closed for 3 days. Trucks could have got through. It might have taken a little while longer, but they could have crossed. There was 2 other border crossings they could have used. The only time that Highway 4, Alberta Provincial Highway 4, was officially closed was by the RCMP at Milk River. So they're trying to make it out like these guys hanging out at the border are somehow responsible for millions of dollars of losses, and they just make all that stuff up, and there's no consideration of all the millions of dollars lost during all the lockdowns or people's lives being ruined during COVID. But this protest where they didn't actually close the border, and the protesters did not close the border. When the Couts border crossing was closed, it was closed at the direction of Canada Border Services Agency, and it was only closed for 3 days. The media ran with this story that those guys had that border crossing shut down and were wouldn't let anybody come or go. And that's totally false. They're just hanging out.
Right. Well, my parents have a pilot truck business, and they were delivering loads across that border crossing throughout that time. So you're out, and Mom said the same thing. It wasn't the protesters down there that were blocking anything. It was all the RCMP.
And one of the things that was going on, like in the run-up to the eventual arrests on the 13th and Jerry Morin on the 14th, is you have the situation on I think the 1st of February, where there were 2 civilians that had a minor collision outside of, in the area of the protests on Highway 4, and they got into an altercation and there was an assault. But then what happened that night was Premier Jason Kenney got on in front of the media and said that the protesters were being violent and assaulting police officers. It turned out the following day, Rebel News reporters, Sidney Fizzard or whatever, he did a follow-up and interviewed Constable Peters, who was there on the scene, and said, no, it was 2 civilians that got a little testy with each other, and that was that. But for many people who saw the news on the CTV and CBC, etc., they probably still believe that there were protesters at the Couts blockade punching out police officers in the beginning of the whole thing.
Well, because they put these insinuations out there, or this misinformation and disinformation, but then they don't get corrected. They don't correct it, and if they do correct it, it comes out as a little teeny byline in 0.5 font, on page 9. So a lot of people, you're right, that get their information and their news from mainstream media are still going to be left with that impression. So
I think that someone should invent something called a credulous-o-meter and see how credulous, if it can gauge how credulous a person is, because there's an awful lot of people, like once they've seen a headline, it's a slam dunk for them.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And that's just what they're going to believe. And I mean, we've seen very clearly, I know myself, Chris, and Tom, for sure, we've seen how people can, once they have their mind made up, there's nothing, you can show them all the evidence in the world and nothing will change their mind. So, they'll actually seek out information or headlines that will fit their narrative, that will support their narrative. So, I mean, it's incredible what these men have been through. It's incredible that it's still going on. Well, I mean, I guess I shouldn't find that too hard to believe, but, let's not forget, how their families have suffered. I know, Tessie Oleanic, that's obviously Tony's mom, Betty Carbert, Granny McKay, who has just been nothing but a massive supporter these ladies have all been working tirelessly to help, their sons and in Granny's case, their friend, to raise money for their cases and get the word out. So huge kudos to Granny and to their families for everything that they've had to endure. I mean, as we all know, when one of us is going through this, it just doesn't affect us as an individual. It affects our families very much so.
Like when there is a lie or put forward, say by the Calgary Herald in late November of 2022, describing Chris Lysyk, according to Tony Oleanic, and I'm sure Gord can say something with this. The Calgary Herald quotes Tony. They say that Tony said of Chris Lysyk that he was, quote, a sniper, a gunfighter, and a hitman. I mean, I can't imagine that would be something that Tony would ever describe Chris Lysyk as. But yet
Right.
they put this story out, and then finally, when Jerry Moore and Chris Lysyk are let out on small weapons charges that are not related to the original indictment, on I think the February 6th of 2024, they're let out without conditions. Yeah, there's no suggestion the day that Chris Lysyk is released that he's a hitman, a sniper, and a gunfighter.
Right.
Yeah, no. When the story starts falling apart and the lies and the inconsistencies sprout up, the people who put those lies and inconsistencies and nonsense forward, like they just scuttle off and disappear and pretend it didn't happen, and they go on with their lives and they face no accountability for what they've done to these guys. I've been very harsh in my criticism online, very harsh of a gentleman named Bill Graveland, who's a reporter for the Canadian Press and who's probably responsible for 70 to 80% of the mainstream media reporting on this, because it goes on a wire and every little newspaper across the country just publishes Bill's stuff. And, he kept going off about the pipe bomb stuff until the very, very, very end of the trial when it finally came out. Like he never conceded that, maybe 200 kilometers away, maybe the cops are padding the story a little bit here, but not until the day that one of Tony's business associates testifies in court to say, no, man, it's an industrial explosive. Like this is what we were using it for. Then he says it after spending 2 years telling the entire country Tony Oleanic was going to throw pipe bombs at the cops. Like,
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Mr. Graveland, if you're watching this, repent.
Well, somebody might be watching this. In any event,
definitely. Some people are.
Yeah, some people. Yeah. Well, when there are allegations made, as we mentioned, as Gord's mentioned, nobody at the trial brought up Diagolon. Just all of a sudden is gone. But in the meantime, and gearing up for the Coutt 2 trial, there's this depiction. Radio Canada described Chris Carbert and Chris Lysyk as connected with Jeremy McKenzie, Jeremy McKenzie's, quote, American-style militia movement. So there's all of these scary things, and there's an awful lot of people in urban Canada that have never owned a rifle, never hunted, or so on. And all they know is stories about people killing each other on the streets of Toronto or whatever, and so they easily get rattled and conclude the worst in a heartbeat. And so all of these allegations can be made, even though it turns out that the vice president of Diagolon was a hand puppet named Philip, who was a goat, and that shouldn't scare the nation.
Yeah, there's a lot of, the funny part about that whole Diagolon thing is that they had the Five Eyes chasing it. They were talking about Mackenzie in New Zealand and in Washington, D.C. and in London. And, there's that Karam Assad thing that came forward where it's like, there's security operators in other countries' intelligence services trying to triangulate this stuff. It's like, why should somebody in New Zealand care about Philip the fucking goat? The whole thing was just racked with absurdities because they didn't have anything, right? They didn't have anything. You guys were in Ottawa. You all saw it.
Yeah.
There was no violence. Everything the government, the media said was a lie. There was never any, robbing of soup kitchens or burning of apartments or nobody got hurt. Nothing happened. They had to pin the whole thing. The only thing they had was these undercover officers at Coutt's taking, maximally negative interpretations of Tony Oleanick shit talking, saying, yeah, I'll die here. They got no recordings of any of this. They don't have anything. They just in their heads, Tony may have been talking smack to them. They write it all down. And then the cops are like, well, this is what we got. And then that goes up the food chain to Ottawa. Ottawa's like, okay, cool. We got our bad guys finally. Don't arrest them, even though you guys are alleging that Jerry Morin's bringing a whole pickup truck load of guns. Don't arrest them yet, because this is what we need in order to justify what we are about to do, because there's no other reason for it anywhere else in the country, right? They literally, in 4 days, they sat on information that they claimed these guys were going to do something for 4 days because they wanted to wait for the EA to come through.
And let me add one other thing, which is a parallel, because what's going on here with the anti-hate network and Barbara Perry and all of that ginning up this story about Diagolon and a hateful, group that's trying to overthrow the Canadian government. Back in the 1960s, when I was not very old, there was somebody called Malcolm X, who was a significant civil rights leader in American Black movement, and he was being followed and surveilled by the FBI in the States, and the FBI has, to this day, no doubt, media-friendly assets that will put out stories. And so they were doing this in 62, 63, 64, where they would describe Malcolm X and his, quote, hateful rhetoric and violent and so on. And I've been reading a book right now called Martyrs of the Unspeakable about the assassinations of President Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy, and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. And some of the stuff that the FBI was doing in the 60s resembles a lot of the hijinks of what's been going on with the RCMP here in Canada regarding the convoy.
Yeah, the mark.
Sure, I thought my computer would freeze up first.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure it wasn't me freezing up.
No, I think it's him. I think it's Gord. Gord's actually got some fundraisers that he set up too in the States. I'm just trying to get him posted in here, but he's raising funds. Anyone that wishes to donate to the men's legal funds, Gord Magill has this set up. www.givesendgo.com. Trudeau's political prisoners. So I'll just leave that up there for a moment. Oh, Gord, I think you're gone.
Gord just texted and said
Okay.
his computer spazzed out on him. So.
Oh, no problem. He's sick anyways. Hopefully he can come
Gotcha,
back, but if not, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Tom, you've been so quiet, uncharacteristically quiet. What's your 2 cents in all of this?
Doing my best. No, I heard a lot of things in there, and I remember during the days of the convoy for so Gord is back. Maybe I'll zip it now. No, but I remember when a good friend of mine, Veterans for Freedom, one of the original guys that started it, a friend of mine named Sammy, he was in Windsor, and I got a message from him during, when everybody went to Windsor, and he had messaged me, and all I said to him is, make sure that you have at least one lane on that bridge open. And he says, yeah, we do. We have a lane open. And he told me in Windsor, they always had a lane open. They weren't blocking it. It was a slower lane, obviously, but they didn't block it. And then I said, okay, no, don't contact me again. And he's a friend of mine, but my issue was that I didn't want Ottawa to be pegged as the national command center for all of these various protests around the country, because my concern was that they would try to invoke some special type of an emergency power and then bring in terrorism legislation if they thought that we were orchestrating everything from Ottawa. And so, in my case, I had told people we need to applaud what they're doing. We need to be able to speak out about what they're doing, but we shouldn't be communicating with all the different protests. And in actual fact, they were doing great. Like, they didn't need our help. I mean, we had our hands full, but they did not need our help. They were doing phenomenal things where they were doing, right? Or where they were. So, but that was my concern, was that if they tried to peg us as the national command center for all these protests around the country, we would all be under a different set of microscopes. And so, as much as, you want to get in, you wanted to help, but here's the funny thing. The commissioner, Tom Carrick from the OPP, during his testimony at the Public Order Emergency Commission, was sitting on the stand, and he said something to the effect of, absolutely, there was one central command who was driving all of this, and you'll never ever convince me otherwise that it wasn't orchestrated by one sort of central group. And I remember sitting there going, geez, thank God I had the foresight to be thinking the way I was thinking, because that would have given legitimacy to the Emergencies Act. But the fact that we weren't coordinating, we weren't talking, I mean, sure, we were probably sending encouragement, but we weren't coordinating because, one, we didn't need to, therefore we didn't have to, and everybody was doing just fine where they were. And that was always a big, big concern that I was having, and again, I could echo all the things that Ray was saying about, what he heard from Jody Thompson and all these, prolific liars that day after day gave testimony that were complete falsehoods and exaggerations. Like, talk about mis and disinformation. Right. Ottawa's ground zero for this. And I wanted to say, the first time I ever met Ray was at the POEC. He had gone out, I think, for a 3 or 4 day, 5 day trip. And we had a chance. We did a real quick interview, I think, just inside the room or out in the hallway, one of the two. And then, Ray we've had several phone calls together. Ray's been a guest in my home. It's great to see people are out there. It's one thing to try to relive and write about your experiences, but what Ray and Gord get to do is research and confirm and verify that the story is correct, right? That's a different thing from a guy like me writing a book and going, oh, I remember this happened. Oh, wait, maybe it was this way. Maybe it was that way. The writers get to do a great job of confirming the details and to read the transcripts and stuff. So, I think their accounts are phenomenal historical records of something that's closer to the truth than what you're ever going to get from Tom Marazzo's poor memory. But it's definitely going to be an accurate record of the lies that are being told by the government. And so I think that that's an important thing that these guys bring in. And I'm glad that they're still doing, writing about it and keeping the awareness up, because it's not over for all the people that are still in jail.
No, it isn't. Can I riff on something you just said, Tom?
Sure.
So the sort of distributed and spontaneous nature of the convoy is something that our friends in the government and the media have a problem acknowledging, right? You just said that they were trying to stiff you guys with having some command center that was telling everybody else in the country what to do, telling the other protesters what to do. They were trying to make it into this big conspiracy. And I want to offer that might be downstream of something misattributed to Marx but actually comes from the school of thought, these Frankfurt School guys who were sort of influenced by Marx and came up with all their own ideas, which is where we get the identity politics and all the woke stuff, is downstream of these Frankfurt School guys. And one of their concepts is something called false consciousness, right? In order to explain why all of these proletariats want to take part in capitalism and buy cars and have fancy clothes and nice things, and they're happy to work for the capitalists to get the pay to do it, is that they've been convinced by the bad people, the capitalists, that this is this lifestyle, this consumerist thing that the Frankfurt School people and the Marxists hate. Oh no, you don't have your own agency. You can't make up your own mind possibly to want to do this. And so what you see is that they cannot fathom that all these Canadians all across the country came to their own decisions about COVID, came to their own decisions about how the COVID regime was executed by the Trudeau government, came to their own decisions about what to do about it, came to their own decisions how to self-organize and to do it spontaneously and without leadership. Because if they can do that, that means their false consciousness narrative is blown out of the water. They don't just have some central bad guy orchestrating everything, right? And they can't break out of that because that's their thought processes. That's how all these administrative, managerial state ghouls think. It's all downstream in part of this sort of Frankfurt School nonsense where like they have to control stuff and everybody is following some controller.
Well said.
And I would add to that at the Public Order and Mercy Commission, CSIS Director David Vigneault was asked, and Michelle Tessier, who was like a deputy with him, they confirmed that since the incident with the real guy that ran in with a gun into Parliament in 2014, the national threat level in Canada has remained at medium. And all the way through the whole convoy, whether you're talking about what was happening in Ottawa or Windsor or Emerson, Manitoba, or Sarnia, or Coutt, or in Surrey, BC, etc., or Cornwall, the national threat level remained throughout the whole convoy protests at medium. And so
yeah, that's true. And I want to jump on that for a second too, because Keith Wilson had reminded me several times, and others, but I don't think people get it, is that no person in Canada during the 10 days of the Emergencies Act were arrested under the powers of the Emergencies Act. They were all arrested and charged under the Criminal Code of Canada, which all the police departments we saw at the commission all testified and said, we never asked for the Emergencies Act, we never needed it, and we never even used it. But for whatever reason, you chose to do it. In fact, on the night of the 13th, the OPP had briefed the IRG, basically their little special task force in the federal government, briefed them on an engagement plan the night before he decided to invoke. They wanted to engage with us because they had a lot of success. They thought it was working. We were cooperating. We were trying to get, a peaceful resolution. No, I shouldn't say peaceful. That's a terrible thing. We were trying to get a resolution that, kept us into position so that we could negotiate in good faith with them, right? So the issue really became, why did you invoke the Emergencies Act? What was the message you were trying to send across the country? That you protest, and we're going to bring every scary piece of legislation we have at our disposal, and we're going to throw it right in your face, even though we don't need it. I mean, remember, the city of Ottawa declared a state of emergency. Doug Ford declared a provincial emergency. Then he invoked the Emergencies Act, and yet nothing was done with it. Nothing.
Exactly.
Not a single person was persecuted under the Emergencies Act. The guys in Coutt, the guys in Windsor, the people in Ottawa, everybody was charged under the Criminal Code of Canada. Everybody. Irrelevant. The EA was irrelevant, but it did terrorize the public. It did freeze financial assets. And, really in a sense, it overplayed their hand because one, it probably really upset the Americans. My guess is, and other people have theorized, that the U.S. State Department called up Trudeau and said, "Knock it off, man," especially when there was a run on TD, right? And then
I think, if I may, Tom,
sure.
There's evidence in theory that, like, so as you say, the Americans may have said enough is enough, but like there was that famous phone call between Trudeau and Joe Biden, which was orchestrated between, oh God, who was that nerd that worked for Biden? Not Pete Buttigieg. Another guy, was it Mark Deese? There was somebody. There was one of Biden's underlings had orchestrated this meeting via Freeland, and Trudeau said, I have a plan. And I think, and something I've said before is that Biden and Buttigieg and all these people didn't care about the Freedom Convoy. They didn't care about the COVID stuff. They were pissed off at the truck delays, right? Because if like everybody has to go across the border at Sarnia, now they're late to their just-in-time manufacturing of automobiles. So this was all to suit the car companies, right? Like I somewhere deep inside of me, I think the Americans are just as much to blame for the imposition of the Emergencies Act as Trudeau is, because I think they were whispering in his ear saying, hey, deal with this bridge. And then, as you put it, Trudeau overplays his hand. Now they're freezing bank accounts, and the rest of the world, including the Americans, are going, whoa.
Yeah.
You can't do that because it scares investors and it scares property, right?
Yeah, and you remember, Tamara, we were sitting in the audience, we were listening to Freeland testify, and she started to get all teary because, the Americans were looking at us as a banana republic and that people wouldn't invest. And she was crying on the stand during the commission because the Americans were losing confidence in the Canadian government and investors, because she was talking to, the billionaire investors in the United States, and they were saying, we're losing faith in you guys. Knock it off, basically, right? And to one of the earlier points that was made, there was never, and this was something Ray and I talked about at your not the sentencing, at the conviction for Chris and Tamara when we were both in Ottawa. There was never any mention of the actions of every level of government for the 2 years previous to the convoy. The convoy was manifested by the behavior of the government, and the citizens in this country, which is their right and their duty, needed to get the government back in line because they were so far out of balance, it was ridiculous. And so this is why the convoy happened. But there was no mention of that I saw in Chris and Tamara's sentencing. There was no mention of what the government did. It was all, let's just look at the evil Chris and Tamara. That's all we care about. Forget about why we got there.
It was like the elephant in the room.
Yes,
it was like the elephant in the room, not only in our trial, but also at the POEC. Like it was just like this big thing that was so glaringly obvious that you just couldn't talk about, right?
You couldn't talk about it at all. And when I looked at, so Chris and I have had this conversation before, he got that extra conviction about, breaking the court order and all that stuff. But the issue is this is the way I always looked at it. Chris did the video. He said, look, if the police attack or if they raid in the middle of the night, lay on the horn, right? Well, there was an injunction that said you had a legal right to be here by Justice McLean. So if we have a right to be here, the cops have to leave us alone and let us be here. But if the cops break the deal and attack the convoy, then I would say the deal's off and you're within your rights to break the deal too, which is to honk the horn as a form of self-defense.
Yeah, well,
and that's how I always...
We are allowed to honk a horn in the state of an emergency, and
yes.
I, in my opinion, when I made that video saying, if you look out your window and you see a vast majority of police coming down the street to kettle you, blow your. I started the video off by saying there's a horn injunction in place. We're not supposed to blow horns, but if you look out the window, see a vast majority of police, blow your horn to let other protesters. They used everything about that against me to find me guilty of going against a court order. And even though it was approved by lawyers at that time when I did it, right?
Yeah, and that's the whole fundamental thing, right? The elephant in the room is the fact that you guys get to misbehave with impunity. Who cares? No one's looking at you. But God forbid, the public, the citizens who pay all their salaries and vote for these psychopaths, If you step out of line and try to hold these people accountable, it'll be you sitting in a cell. We won't look at the actions of the government. We will only look at the actions of the public, because the rule of law, right? It's ridiculous, but it applied across this country in every instance. From, I think there was protests in BC to Coutt to Windsor to Ottawa. In every instance, only the actions of the people were examined, not the actions of the government. I mean, there's a great case in Constable Bosco, I think, is in Windsor. He donated $50 anonymously to the convoy from Windsor. And then when that lunatic doxed everybody, his police department found out that he donated $50. And what did it cost him? 80 hours of salary. He got charged under the Police Services Act for donating money. And this officer was put on unpaid leave for not abiding by the mandates. So he wasn't technically on duty when he did it. He was an anonymous donor, and he wasn't being paid. And they charged him under the Police Services Act for discreditable conduct for donating $50 anonymously to a legal protest. Okay, he donated it before the invocation of the Emergencies Act. He didn't break any laws, but there you go. You're going to hammer anybody that doesn't fall in line with the official government narrative. And that's always the way. Let's just look at you. We won't look at the guilty party.
Yeah, and that's been exactly the same, throughout, not just the convoy, but the Coutt cases too. So,
So I noticed in the chat a couple. If I could just change the subject really, but I like to respond to the crowd. Someone asked about the procession of the civil case against you guys from Paul Champ, and I would like to know what's going on with the attempt to seize Big Red. If we get an update on those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll start with Big Red.
Well, as far as go ahead with Big Red. You go ahead with Big Red.
We go back to court on Wednesday. November 26th is the next forfeiture hearing for Big Red. So my plans as it stands right now is I will unhook this trailer on Saturday in Swift Current, and I'll head back to Nebraska to load on Monday and hopefully be home Tuesday night again. And I will spend the day on Zoom trial from home on Wednesday. So it's still a lengthy legal battle, and of course we're fighting and doing whatever we can. Brendan Miller's in there, of course, hitting as many home runs as he can and stirring up as much questions as he can. So it's going to be a long process, but we're not giving up on it. We've got a good case, and as I'm sitting in my truck right now that I've owned for on the 26th of November, it will be 22 years that I have owned this truck. On November 26th, 2003, I picked up Big Red from Custom Truck Sales in Regina, Saskatchewan for the very first time. My biggest loan I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
And then, if I might chime in as a fellow trucker, we live in a very throwaway society, and a lot of trucking companies only lease their trucks, maybe keep them 3-5 years, maybe 7. Owner operators like Chris might keep them a little more. But the fact you've kept your truck that long, raised your kids in it, had your dogs, it's provided you and your family your daily bread. And the fact they would do this to you, that really, really, really offends me, that they would seize this machine, this tool. This is how you interact with the world. This is how you feed your family. You've treated it so well. Keeping a friggin' big truck on the road for 20 years is no small task. It's a lot of dedication, a lot of money, a lot of care and maintenance, and these bastards want to take it from you. Oh.
I go through really different feelings of bitterness and anger and rage in a day at some of the things that have transpired in the last 4 years, and I really have to check myself every now and then. If people see me disappear from social media, that means I need a little bit of a mental break from as much going on. I try to bury my head in work and family and just. This is what we've been facing the last while. And if people can't open their eyes in this country to see how far the government will go and how vicious and vindictive they will be, it's pretty sad.
Well, and like I said, I mean, you just have to look at the way that the Couts men have been treated throughout this whole thing to see that that's absolutely true. Gord and Ray, I've had you guys on here now for just over an hour. I'm sure you're getting tired. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation tonight before I let you guys go, and tell people where we can find you? And also,
Before, tell us about Chump. Tell us about the civil case. We never got to that.
Oh, there's really not too much to report on the civil case right now. We're basically just waiting for it. They have to file the certification motion, so that we're just waiting for Paul Champ to get that motion filed, I guess. And really, it's just a hurry up and wait game, honestly. So there's really nothing happening as far as any forward progress right now.
Well, I
Hopefully
do
we'll
want
hear
to,
something
I
in
do
the
want
next
to,
few weeks.
I do want to add that this summer the public responded incredibly generously to us. We did do a fundraiser, and because we had a $18,000 bill, the group of us, and then there was an additional $2,000 that was required for Pat King as part of the same lawsuit. In 9 hours 15 minutes, the public responded and supported us and gave us the money to pay this legal court cost that we got nailed with in the lawsuit. And so by the generosity of all the donors, we paid the 18 for all of us, and we paid the $2,000 for Pat King. And we've all been doing this kind of stuff. We've always been. All of us have been involved in fundraisers of some kind to try to help people, because we just want to. Like, we legit want to help people. We like to be invited to fundraisers. We do them all the time. I know, Tamara, you actually did a concert to raise money that helped towards Pat King's legal stuff. Chris, you were supposed to go to an event last year, as an example of where you were supposed to go, but because of the conditions that Pat had, you didn't go. You let him go instead. Like, there are things that we're out there trying to do to help each other and to help people we don't even know raise money for their legal costs. It's something that we do, and the public has been incredibly supportive for all of us when we try to do that. I'm grateful for it all the time, that people even think to support us and to help us. So, it's great that we're posting stuff for the guys involved in all the Coutt stuff. And I know Canadians are generous, and they will help. And, from the bottom of my heart, I thank everybody for helping us all the time. So thanks to the donors.
Absolutely. None of us would have gotten this far without the generosity of Canadians and Americans too. I mean, we have a lot of support all over the world, actually, right? So as we know.
I was loading in Grand Island, Nebraska at the combine plant this morning, and a young guy walked across the parking lot who was unloading tires. And he said, my name is, I believe it was Josh. And he said, I'm a huge supporter. I can't believe you and Big Red are sitting here and I get to talk to you. I had to come over and say hi. I asked him where he's from. North Carolina. And he's an avid listener and a fan. So I thanked him. I shook his hand and wish him all the well. He was trying to get home before Thanksgiving. So if you're listening, buddy, I hope everything goes well and safe travels. It was nice meeting you.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool.
I wanted to.
Well, I mean, that's one thing that we always say. We've on this whole journey. It's been a wild ride, but we've got to meet some amazing people. We've got to meet some amazing supporters, and we've got to find people like each other and the Couts guys, and have created a bit of a family out of it, actually. So I think in a lot of ways, as much as there's so much about this whole situation that sucks terribly. There's also a lot of good that it's come out of it, and there's still a lot to be grateful for. But, we just can't forget about these guys. They still have an uphill battle. We will run these links to their fundraisers again here for everybody. And thanks you guys for coming on. And any final thoughts, Ray?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that ironically, Tony and Chris Carber were in the Drumheller institution, and they were in, I understand, like adjacent, cabins or whatever they're called, and they're able to talk to each other every day. But now that Chris Carber is out, his conditions are he's not allowed to talk to Tony, as I understand it. So it's like, you're trying to make it make sense. Yeah.
Make it make sense.
Well,
Ray
Gord,
McGinnis, where can people
Ray?
find you at?
Sure, you can follow me on X at RAYMCGINNIS, and then I was given the digit 7, not because I chose it, just seemed to happen. I'm not very techy, so
Ooh,
that's
that's a
me.
lucky number.
Yeah, lucky number 7, and if people want to get unjustified, the Freedom Convoy, the Emergencies Act, and the Inquiry that got it wrong, it's always great to do it either. If you order it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever, sometimes physical bookstores look at the sales and then say, okay, we're going to stock that book in our own bookstore. And it's always good to leave a review, whether it's Kobo or Goodreads or whatever else, because that always helps. Because there's always a few people out there that seem to be like trolls. That the first review I get for a book is usually a 1 out of 5, and then everyone
Right.
after that's a 4 or 5 out of 5.
Yeah. And I just want to say, Chris and Ray and I and myself are all talking about, Ray's going to come out here, I think in January sometime. We're going to set aside a weekend where he can come and do a book signing at my house, and then he'll go out to Saskatchewan and do a book signing there. So if you're in the Medicine Hat, Southern Saskatchewan area, and you want a copy of Ray's book signed, we'll just watch for details. We'll have that all posted as we get closer to those dates in January and get something confirmed. So we're really excited to have you come out, Ray.
I'm going to go
Me
so far as
too.
to say that I will open the shop up. We'll get some chairs in there. Big Red can be a centerpiece in the shop. We'll turn the furnace up nice and warm, and let's see how many we can put in that shop that we have on the farm in Sturt Valley where I'm under house arrest. I can't wait for that to happen, Ray.
Great.
Chris, if you pay me to come speak, I might be able to come.
We will try that. We will definitely try that.
Just kidding.
Guys, let me.
Well, thank you so much. Gord, did we lose you?
We haven't been able
Nope,
to do this
I'm here.
yet. I'm going to do the royal send-off because I'm in Big Red right now, and there's a whole.
Oh, do it.
Ready?
Okay.
Oh my God, I'm
Great.
still going back to
Okay.
jail.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Gord,
All of
I want
a
to thank
bunch
you
of
so much for
liberals.
taking time out of your day, and I know you're not feeling well. Please tell everyone where they can find you. You have a book you said that's coming out in March. My bad, I said earlier that it was coming out next week, but End of the Road coming out in March. And where can people find you?
You can find me at autonomoustruckers.substack.com or on Twitter at Gord Magill. Yes, indeed. My book about the sort of fate of the North American trucker, the job, the archetype, the idea, our understanding of it, comes out in March. It starts with the Freedom Convoy and ends with the Freedom Convoy. The intro and the final chapter, the whole thing is bookended by it. I want people to write letters to Tony. It's all good for us to sit around. Tony's still in jail. Please write him letters.
That banner up. What's the address, Gord?
It's hold on, I'm gonna find it for you right now. It is
it Mickey's?
no, you can write letters directly to Tony in Drumheller, and it has to be like on plain paper with plain black or blue ink, no stickers, nothing crazy. They have very specific rules about that. So on the envelope you would write inmate Anthony Olyanek, Drumheller Penitentiary, P.O. Box 3000, Highway 9, Drumheller, Alberta, TOJ 0Y0. Tony's going to be in there for a little bit yet. He loves to hear from everybody. He always writes back. Christmas is coming, and I'm sure he could use good communications from his fellow patriots. He loves to hear from everybody. If you got a couple of bucks to share, there's various ways to donate all across the place. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. I don't know if you caught that address, Ruby, but I didn't. It was too fast for me. But anyways, we can post that.
Yeah, if you go to my website, autonomoustruckers.substack.com, my most recent posting is about Tony. Go all the way to the bottom of it, and all the instructions are there.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, thanks again, you guys. I just want to wish everybody good night. I don't have any mean tweets ready tonight. Unfortunately, it was a very busy week getting some of the stuff organized and police visits in the middle of the night. But Once again, Tom, Gord, Ray, thank you so much for joining us here on House Arrest this week. Next week, I'm going to be in Manitoba. So I don't know what we're going to do yet, but that's one of the best things about doing this. We can fly by the seat of our pants. So anyways, thank you to Ruby for helping us out. And thanks to everyone for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Great. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.